Hi, it's Gadget UK here again. As you can see, just a quick update here on the Super SD System 3. So there's a bit of news. You can see obviously I've received like a final commercial version here with the box, you know, the shell and everything, so we'll have a look at that. It's a really sweet shell. I'm very impressed with the quality actually of the moulded shell they've gone for there. It's not 3D printed or anything like that, it's a super high quality moulded shell. So there was a delay on these. They were due to go out before Christmas, but I think because of a shortage of the chips actually within Europe, there was a shortage on the CPLDs and FPGAs. It was delayed until just after Christmas. Now, I think first few weeks of Christmas, some of these units went out. I think they had a couple of hundred ready to ship, and I think after the first 10 or 20 arrived, one or two people started to find a couple of AV issues with their TVs. You know, the system itself worked fine. You know, the optical drive emulator there, and you know the ability to play HuCards and save your game saves and things. That all worked fine. No issues there, but one or two people noticed some graphical or video interference issues with their setups, their TVs and things. So I'm kind of kicking myself really. I should have paid more attention to the AV side of things. But as you saw in my video, and I've used this an awful lot. This is the other point I would make here. I've tested over 300 different games, some of them for an hour or two or longer, others just for maybe several minutes just to make sure it boots and the intro plays and the game starts and everything seems to work as it should. So I tested an awful lot of games, but what I didn't do is go around the house and test it on 4 or 5 different TVs, etc. So I didn't notice any problems at all, but it was just related, I think the issue related to the ground planes. The digital and analog ground planes were not connected correctly, effectively, so that on the AV side of things your ground was being affected by the digital side of things. So on certain TVs and things and certain setups, that you could get some minor interference, and stuff, and it was pretty subtle actually. Some of the photos and videos and things I've seen of the issue, it's quite minor. It's like, well, if I had spotted it, I probably wouldn't have been bothered. I might have pointed it out if I'd spotted it, but it wouldn't have bothered me, seriously. It isn't a big deal, but for some people it perhaps is. It depends, it might vary on from system to system and TV to TV effectively. But anyway, so yeah, credit to Terra Onion. What they did straight away is they've I think it was Voltar actually helped them. I'll post a link to his channel in the description, but it's Voltar. Helped them work out what the fault was, what the issue was, and what they perhaps needed to do to solve it. So they've gone away and they've come up with a board revision and they've done a product recall. So, and it's an optional recall. So it's like, for example, in my case here, would I send my system back? I probably wouldn't, to be honest. I'm not that bothered. That may seem crazy. Some people might want to get the newer PCB to deal with that issue, but for me personally, I'm not bothered because I don't get the graphical issues on my TVs here, and I've gone around and tested it on a few different TVs since, and actually for me it's okay. I could have just looked out because I've got a Proto. Mine did have the resistors and caps on the board, but from what I understand, that's not going to affect the ground plane issue. But one thing I have noticed, and I can perhaps show you that on the Proto, is if I turn the volume up super loud, I can hear the some digital interference when it's reading from the SD. So yeah, again, it's like saying, my bad, I should perhaps have thought of testing that. It's just not the sort of thing you think of doing. I'm reviewing a product, let's max out the volume on the TV and see if we can hear any interference from anything on the board that shouldn't be there. Yeah, lessons learned, moving forward. Any of the products that I come to review like this, it's got AV capability, I'll do exactly that, and we'll go around and test it on a few different things, get it on a CRT, etc. But anyway, hats off to the Terra Onion team doing a recall at their expense. Yes, there's a delay now of about 4 to 6 weeks whilst they get the new boards in, but it's worth it. Anybody who's still waiting for one of these, I would suggest to you, it is worth that wait. It seriously is. And like I say, credit to these guys. They've done that at their own expense. They didn't need to. They could have just left it as it was. But they want their products to be perfect. So yeah, hats off to them, and thanks to the people that helped fix, identify and fix the problem, Voltar included. So inside the box there, the first thing you're greeted with is this quick user guide sat on the top of the package in there. And again, it's really nicely put together. I will have a read of this later to see if there's anything I'm not aware of with regards to functionality. You can see there, it talks about the file formats, PCE, .q, .bins. Yeah, very nice. And then there's the shelled units, and like I said, look at the quality. Look at the quality of that. That's absolutely fantastic. It really is. Every attention to detail there. It's super. That's as good as any commercial product you would have got back in the day. Absolutely brilliant. So I guess it's worth doing a recap. You know, if you've not seen this before, if you didn't see my previous video, you should go and watch it. I'll stick a link to the previous video in the description. But yeah, this allows you to play pretty much all games on the PC Engine. And you only need the standard PC Engine, you know, something like that. And it gives you RGB out the back, you know, and it'll play CD games, Super CD games, arcade games, HuCards, all from a little micro SD there. And I sort of touched on it in the previous video about wear and tear. You know, a good reason to want one of these is not just the cost. This is, you know, it's expensive, but this is cheaper than a CD system, a lot cheaper. And you don't need an EverDrive, but it saves wear and tear on your system. It saves wear and tear on your slots, you know, your card slot, wear and tear on your HuCards, wear and tear on your system cards, you know, because they've got RAM in. You know, the system cards you use to boot various CD games, you've got RAM on some of those, on the System Card 3 card and on the arcade card. You know, eventually that's going to die, it's not going to last forever. And you've got wear and tear on your CDs, you could scratch your CDs, you know. So I've just removed the top part of the shell there, just to give you a quick look at the finished boards here. Yeah, and this is fantastic, totally up to their previous quality. The new board revision is going to say Terra Onion instead of neosdstore.com, I think. But yeah, you can see how much better quality the soldering is on this one compared to the, you know, what was a prototype, as I showed in the previous video. It's a darker green as well. I don't know if you can tell there, but it's yeah, darker green PCB. But yeah, there's nothing much to see. It's just that this is, you know, the same, I think, as the prototype. It's, I think, subtly different in the layout here, actually. So all connected up to the PC Engine there. Switch it on, and you should be able to see the LED flash there. That's quite cool. And if I put you on the screen, you'll see it's, you know, it's working fine. So what I'm going to do now is connect up the TG16 actually, and we'll just see how that goes. So you'll note, following up from my previous TG16 video, I removed the mod I had there, so it's back to factory this. And touch wood, yeah, that's going to fit okay, I think. Yeah, that's a pretty good fit actually. I'm pleased with that. So I'll connect the power up and we'll give that a try. So we're all connected up, switch it on, LED flashing, put it on screen. You can see it's working fine with the TurboGrafx 16 as well. So the first comment there I'd like to make actually is in regard to the TG16. It's working with the PAL units as well, so that's some great news from the previous video, because I think in the comments there I was talking around the time suggesting that they were testing. I think, you know, I think there were some issues with the PAL one, but they've got that working. So let's just load a game up. Let's try Cotton. So this is on the TG16 at the moment. I've got an NTSC version here. And I guess that's something else to point out while I'm here as well, correction to my TG16 video there. You can identify whether it's NTSC super easy just by looking at the logo here. The logo's subtly different. I think on the European units, you know, PAL or whatever, it's got a different logo. I'll see if I can find an image and I'll stick it up here in the video or something just to show you. But yeah, that's the clue. So the other thing I want to talk about while we're just watching the intro to Double Dragon here is testing, and how sometimes testing can be quite difficult, and it can be quite difficult to get the balance right in terms of what you present when you're doing a review of a product like this. You know, so I mean, I've got a bit of a conscience really. You know, there's a few things I feel a bit bothered about myself that I didn't pick up on while I was testing, and I did have a bit of abuse actually on on the previous video, where someone pointed out, you know, the Terra Onion team need to get better testers, and you know, I don't agree with that. As part of the testing, I must have spotted about 12, maybe 13 or 14 different issues, and I worked through those with the Terra Onion team, as we, you know, to get fixes in place there. You know, they work really hard to identify causes and things, and actually in most cases they've spotted them and fixed them really super quick. I'm talking like within half an hour of me reporting it. So that's good to know. But the point I'm trying to make is there was a lot of effort gone in by me and other people in terms of testing. I tested almost 300 games myself. I'll just zoom out a bit, it's a bit close to that. Yeah, over 300 games myself. I got the entire, PC Engine CD collection, and I got all my favourites on one card there, probably well over 100 games. 64 gig card, and on the other card I just kept loading it up and testing through each game there, some of them just for a few minutes each, making sure all the intro stuff worked, all the cutscenes, that the sounds and CD audio tracks were working okay, and that the game would start and you could play for a few minutes into it without any issues. So I did spend quite a bit of time testing there. We did, like I say, between us fix, identify, and they fixed a bunch of things, and it's pretty much perfect. I think Alex asked me just before he was going to ship this, so how do you feel? Do you think we're at a good level, confidence-wise, for the things you've tested? And I was like, yeah, actually, from everything I've tested, there's no issues. There were no outstanding issues at all. But there were a couple of things that have resulted in the hardware revision. Those new boards are in manufacture at the moment, and I think probably about 4 or 5 weeks' time they will ship. So there's been a bit of a delay. I kind of feel a bit responsible myself for that, in terms of the testing, that perhaps there were a few things I missed. And the reason they did that recall, there was 2 issues. One of them was the RGB issue. So as you're watching this now, in fact, as you're watching this now, this is on composite. Long story. The cable I've got has got an issue, so I'm using a composite cable at the moment. But there was an issue on the board where they originally had resistors and caps to pass the RGB signals through, and they posted on the Neo Geo forums, and loads of people started bitching and moaning about how they shouldn't have them on the board and they should be in the cable. And I don't agree with that, actually, because it was working fine. I know some of the cables have already got the resistors and caps in, but it's one of those, some people suggest that you're perhaps better off having the caps and things, the caps on the board and the resistors and the cable, and that's probably the ideal combination. But the cables out there for Mega Drive Mark IIs have got resistors and caps in them. Some of them have not got either, and some of them have got resistors only, some of them have got caps only. It's a mess, really, in terms of the cables that are out there, but that's got nothing to do with the Terra Onion team. So anyway, long story short, the one thing they were aware of was the voltage levels of the RGB lines there. I think they were 0.8 volts peak to peak, and they should be 0.7. So they were slightly over. Now that's not something I noticed. For my testing, it looked nice and bright and colourful and clear. No issues at all. No noise, or banding, or jail bars or anything like that. Really, it looked pretty sweet. So from my perspective, I didn't see any issue there, and I did test on a couple of different TVs I've got here, no issues whatsoever. Now what I didn't do is, obviously test on all TVs, lots of different ones, and I didn't compare side by side to go, oh, the brightness level's 7% too bright, or whatever it is, maybe 10% or something, I didn't do that. And the other thing I didn't do was turn up the audio on the TV to let me see if I can do it now, to 60-70%, if that's too loud now. But as soon as you get quite high, like 70-80%, you can hear the MCU, as an ARM, I think it's an ARM processor, on the board as a background noise, very, 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 very quiet level. I mean, like super quiet level. Now that might vary from board to board. It could depend on your cables. It could depend on all sorts of things. But I've got a Proto and an actual, Super System 3 here, and I can't hear it on them unless I turn the volume to like 80 or 90%, and then it's so loud that if you had actual music playing, it's way too loud to play. I'd have the neighbours come around complaining. So it's very subtle. But the reason that the recall rule was primarily for that, and they figured, why not? If they're going to do that and get this absolutely perfect, because that's how the way these guys work, that's how they roll. They like to get things absolutely 100% spot on, and if it's not, it's something significantly, like there's a significant issue that they deem means that it's not perfect, that, like I said, they've done a hardware recall at their own expense, a board revision, it's going to cost them a load of money, it seriously is. And one or two people might have been put off in that time because of the recall thing, and I say don't be put off at all. Put your order in, because you're getting an even better product than I initially reviewed now. And it's thanks to, I guess I've got to add a thanks in there actually, because I know the Terra Onion team have thanked him already, but Voltar, I'll stick a link down below, not up, down below to his channel. You should check out his videos. He does some really funny and clever, smart, intelligent repairs and upgrades and things. He's does a really tidy, clean job. I compare him to retro game mods actually in terms of his level of perfection there, in terms of getting things just right when it comes to mods and things for systems, especially RGB mods. He's got a lot of experience in that area. So it was Voltar that helped identify the cause of that noise there from the processor, the MCU, interfering with the sound and potentially the video, because I think that was the wider issue that a few people were having. They were getting jail bars and noise. In fact, the jail bars is an important point to talk about as well. Actually, the jail bars can't be fixed by this. If you can get jail bars on a PC engine, you need to do the mod where you stick a cap on. Is it the GPU? I think it is, somewhere on one of the. You had a bypass cap there. It's the GPU. You replace the ones that are there, I think, on some boards, and swap them out with a beefier one. But anyway, that's a side note, really. I'm just sorry I didn't test it a little bit more thoroughly, because, like I say, I've had egg on my face. People have been kicking off and saying, you didn't test it thoroughly enough, blah blah blah. Well, I think that's, to a degree, is crap, because it does work really well. For me, the systems I've got, the TVs I've got here, it sounds well, it looks well. There are no issues at all. But to be fair, I'd be happy even if it was just composite. The RGB gives you a much clearer, better picture, and that's what I'm using, most of the time. But for me, RGB is not one of those things that I look at with a mega critical eye, really. For the same reason, I'm not bothered about going to HDMI type solutions a lot of the time. But that was caused by the analog and digital ground planes and the way they're joined. So the digital, the MCU, was interfering with the the analog, the audio output, and the video, but to a really super minor level. Well, in my setup here with the two different cards, an actual commercial one and the Pro, so they both behave the same way. For me, they work fine. In fact, they work fine on three TVs actually, because I connected these up to an analog TV as well, and that gave the best picture of all, actually, surprisingly. So, other things to talk about. We've had a lot of people griping about the size of SD cards, the cost of them, saying 128 gig cards are dead expensive, and yeah, they are a bit more expensive, but you can get like a 64 gig card like I did for about £19. And I'll show you what I've got on here. Now, this is just the CDs on this one card here, so I'm not quite sure how many I've got, but these are all of the games that I would want to play myself personally. Yeah, a fair few. And then if I go back to the other folder, HuCards, go back one, HuCard, and then I've got every single HuCard. So, you can fit an awful lot on here. And on the other card, I've got another 64 gig card that I got just for purposes of testing. I don't need it. It's like I say, I've got everything I want on this one card. I've still got space on here, actually. I don't know how much. There might be about 10 gig or something free still. But on the other card, I've got over 110 games, I think, on the other card. So, that just gives you an idea of what you can fit. I would say approximately 100 to 110 games. I mean, you can work the size out. You can probably fit more than 110 games, actually. 64 gig, the games are, the typical one might be 600 meg, in fact, they're not even that. On average, they're probably about 200 or 300 meg. But a CD is what, 600-700 meg, 680 meg-ish. So if the CD's full, yeah, you're going to use, 680 to 700 meg-ish. But on average, like I say, they're about 200, 300 meg. There are many games that are, 50, 100, less than 200 meg in size. So you can fit an awful lot on 64 gig. So something else I forgot to point out in the previous video is you can boot HuCards with this. You know, I can still have the Super SD System 3 connected to the back here, and I could just now plug in the HuCard and it will boot straight from the HuCard, no issues at all. So that's good to know, because a lot of people were asking, you know, what do I have to keep disconnecting it when I want to put one of my own HuCards in? I mean, I don't know why you would want to put your own HuCard in, to be honest, because you've got everything on it. But I can understand from a nostalgia point of view, maybe from homebrew, you know, maybe you get like Atlantean or something like that, where you've got your own homebrew cart, you know, you could just stick it in and it will work and it'll boot without an issue. And when you use the HuCard on the front like that, if that game uses the save support, it will save to the SD card as normal, but it'll save, rather than, it's not a game per game save, it's like a single common save that's used for all games that you stick into the front here. That's the way I understand that. So the other thing worth pointing out is the load times are much faster on this versus an actual CD. I'll load a bit of Super Raiden here. Let's just hit start, and I'll put the time up in a sec, so you can see how quick that loaded. And then we'll do the same thing, just loading from Super CD-ROM. I'll hit start now. There we go. Hit run. And hopefully, you should be able to get an idea of time differences. And this is approximate. So the other thing that's new is the software you get. You can just point it at your SD card and it goes through, and you can see here it produces these little thumbnails. So as long as it can identify the game, it will have a thumbnail there. And I think most of them are done. Yeah, most of them, you know, show a thumbnail. Devil's Crash, you can see there. Very cool. So just wrapping up here now. Very impressed with the presentation, you know, the packaging, and the you know, the actual case here as well. I would say it's just a little bit tight on the TG16. You can see, you know, I pressed it a little bit there, but it fits okay, you know. So I mean, you could just scrape those down a bit, but to be fair, you know, it fits quite well actually, no issues. I'm very impressed with how Terra Onion have handled this, you know, this technical issue with the ground plane thing and the RGB levels. You know, doing a recall, they didn't need to do that. No one was forcing them to do that. They, you know, their reputation is very important to them. They want to make sure that you know, consumers are totally happy, and that this product is as good as it possibly can be. So yeah, major kudos to them. Hats off. Impressed as always. One of the things you've got to do when you're testing a new product like this, especially if you're one of the first few people to get hold of this product for review, is to work with the developer, you know, with the supplier of the system or the software or the hardware or whatever, because, you know, you're kind of gifted with a bit of power there to a degree, that had I reviewed this based on the experience I first had, you know, where a number of games weren't working, there were glitches and things and bugs and things, people wouldn't have wanted it. But, you know, the point is that, you know, I worked with the team there and fed back on those issues, and resolved them. They resolved them very, very, very quickly. Gave me an update. You know, the firmware updates take about 5 seconds to apply, and they're done in a secure way, the same way the Neo SD did. You know, i.e. the boots loader doesn't get updated. So if anything goes wrong, you can always, you know, it's unbreakable. You can always do what they call a forced firmware update. So even if the PC engine doesn't boot, to allow you to, you know, select that update, you can do a forced update. You know, the Terra Onion team will give you a forced update, stick it on your SD card, and this, you know, the ARM processor will look at that SD card, will look for that update, regardless of what's going on with the firmware. You know, so if you did break one, you can unbrick it that way. But yeah, so, you know, like I say, I had to be, you know, the way I approach reviews, I've got to work with the developers and things of these, you know, these systems to give them a chance. You know, it's a similar thing when I did the review of the Neo SD. When I looked at the Neo SD, there were lots of issues to start with on my setup, and I could have totally slated that product, and that would have been a big mistake, because actually it's one of the best things I've you know, purchased over the last, you know, several years, you know, for the retro scene. For, you know, one of my retro machines here, the Neo SD was fantastic. So you can see that, you know, there's a fine line there to find between being critical of something, you know, before it's had a chance to get its feet on the ground, and, you know, trying to support the people developing it to get a good launch, so that you get those problems resolved and that people are going to get a good product. So yeah, I'm sorry if anyone's you know, took offence, let's say, from my previous review there, that I missed out the things to do with the RGB and the you know, the audio and video being affected by the you know, noise from the MCU. It's, you know, it's just so easy to miss that on my setup here. So hopefully you found that interesting. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.